The event planner blocked my path in front of 300 guests and sent me to the kitchen because my daughter said there was no room for me. I am Eleanor Vance. I am 68 years old and I paid for every last cent of this party. What my daughter forgot is that without my signature, not even a glass of water gets served here. I had dressed up with a dedication I hadn't felt in years. In front of the mirror in my bedroom, I smoothed the fabric of my wine-colored dress. It was a sober but elegant shade, fitting for a grandmother who has worked all her life. It wasn't a foreign designer dress like the ones my daughter Jasmine insisted on buying for herself and my granddaughter Maya, but it was good fabric sewn by a seamstress in the neighborhood who still knows what a good stitch looks like. I put on the pearl earrings that my late husband Marcus gave me when we celebrated our 20th anniversary. I looked at myself and saw an older woman, yes, with the marks of time on her face and hands slightly swollen from arthritis. But I also saw a dignified woman. In my handbag wrapped in a velvet cloth, I carried the antique silver cake server. It wasn't an expensive gift in terms of modern money, but it was the same knife and server with which I cut my wedding cake and with which I cut the cake at Jasmine's Sweet 16. I thought it would be a beautiful gesture of tradition to pass that object to Maya so she could feel she is part of a chain of strong women. I left my house with a heart full of pride. A granddaughter's 16th birthday is a milestone, a blessing. During the ride in the Uber toward the venue, the Crystal Palace, I mentally reviewed the bills, the rental of the hall, the decoration with imported flowers that Jasmine demanded, Maya's princess dress, the live band, and above all, the catering service. Everything had come out of my life savings, from the sale of the land Marcus and I bought with so much sacrifice decades ago. Jasmine, my daughter, always had expensive tastes, but a hole in her pocket. Since she got divorced, I assumed the economic burden of the house, the private schools, and of course this excessive party. Don't worry about anything, Mama. Jasmine had told me months ago. You just pay and enjoy. I'll take care of organizing everything so it's perfect. You're too old to stress about details. And I, foolish me, trusted her. I thought her insistence that I not get involved in the organization was an act of love, a way of taking care of me. I never imagined it was a strategy to wipe me off the map. Upon arriving at the hall, the noise of the music and laughter spilled out onto the street. It was an imposing place with marble stairs and gigantic chandeliers that shone so bright they hurt your eyes. I tipped the driver and climbed the steps slowly, minding my knees. At the entrance, 2 security guards were checking a list. I gave my name with my chin held high. Eleanor Vance, I said. The guard looked at his tablet, frowned, and then let me pass without much ceremony. I entered the grand ballroom. The blast of air conditioning and the smell of expensive perfume and fresh leaves wrapped around me. There were 300 people there. Important people from the city, friends of Jasmine who never greet me, Maya's schoolmates, and some distant relatives who only show up when there is free food. I scanned the room for the head table. It was situated on a platform decorated with silver silk tablecloths and centerpieces that looked like crystal trees. There was Jasmine, radiant in a gold dress that was a little too tight, laughing loudly with her friends. And there was my granddaughter Maya, beautiful, looking like a little doll, but with her gaze glued to her cell phone, oblivious to everything. I walked between the tables, greeting some acquaintances who looked at me with certain strangeness, as if they didn't expect to see me there, or as if my simple dress clashed with so much fake glitter. I headed toward the platform. My place had to be there, next to my daughter and my granddaughter. I am the matriarch, the provider, the grandmother. It is what custom and respect dictate. I was about to put a foot on the first step of the platform when a young woman dressed in severe black, and with an earpiece in her ear stood in my way. She carried a clipboard pressed against her chest and wore an expression of cold, calculating efficiency. It was the event organizer, a woman named Chloe, whom I had seen a couple of times, but with whom I had never exchanged a word since Jasmine wouldn't let me participate in the meetings. "Excuse me, Miss Eleanor," she said, extending an arm to stop me. It wasn't a gentle gesture, it was a barrier. The music stopped for an instant to make way for the song change, and that sudden silence made her voice sound louder than necessary. Several people at nearby tables turned their heads. "Good evening, miss," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "I'm going to my seat with my family." The woman consulted her clipboard, although she clearly didn't need to. She knew perfectly well what her instructions were. "I'm very sorry, but you can't go up there," she said with a tone that pretended to be polite, but dripped with poison. Jasmine has given me precise instructions. The family table is full. I felt as if I had been slapped with an open hand. The heat rose to my face. Excuse me. I asked, sure I had heard wrong. I am Jasmine's mother. I am the birthday girl's grandmother. I understand, ma'am, insisted the organizer, speaking slowly as if I were a small child or a senile old woman. But the seats are assigned for the parents of the birthday girl's friends and influential people. There are no extra chairs. I looked toward the table. There was plenty of space. I saw people I barely knew sitting there. People Jasmine wanted to impress. My daughter saw me. I am sure she saw me. Our eyes met for a second. She had a glass of champagne in her hand. Instead of coming down to defend me or ordering them to bring a chair, she looked away and turned toward a blonde woman on her left, letting out an exaggerated laugh. She ignored me. She denied me. The pain in my chest was sharp, physical. All I knew the business. I looked at the waiters circulating with the trays of appetizers. I recognized the uniforms, black vests with silver trim, Laurel Catering. My heart skipped a beat. Not only did I know that company, I was the mentor to the owner, Robert, when he was just a boy washing dishes in my kitchen 20 years ago. When I retired, I passed many of my clients to him. The organizer was still standing there in front of me with her borrowed arrogance, waiting for me to leave humiliated toward the service area. In the kitchen, I repeated, no longer with a trembling voice, but with a soft, almost sweet tone. Yes, ma'am. Please don't make this difficult. They are your daughter's orders. I smiled. It was a small smile, the kind of smile one wears when they know the punchline of a joke that no one else has understood yet. Don't worry, dear, I told the organizer. I understand perfectly. I don't want to ruin my daughter's aesthetic. I turned around with a dignity that seemed to surprise her. I didn't walk toward the kitchen like a scolded employee. I walked toward the side exit, a discreet hallway that the vendors used. As I walked away, I felt the eyes on my back. Surely, they thought, poor lady. How sad. They didn't know that the sadness had evaporated, replaced by a cold and absolute clarity. I reached the service hallway. It was cooler there, away from the hot lights of the ballroom. I took my cell phone out of my bag. My fingers, which minutes before were trembling from arthritis and nerves, now dialed with precision. I searched my contacts. Robert Catering. I dialed the number. It rang twice. Hello, answered a thick, rushed voice. Who is this? We are swamped right now. Robert, it's Eleanor Vance, I said. My voice sounded firm, authoritative, the voice of the boss I was for 3 decades. There was a silence on the other end of the line, followed immediately by a drastic change in tone. Miss Eleanor, what did something happen? My guys are serving at your granddaughter's party right now, right? I hope everything is to your liking. They told me the prime rib turned out spectacular. Robert, listen to me closely. I interrupted him. I need you to verify something in your system right now. The contract for today's event. Maya's Sweet 16 at the Crystal Palace. Yes, of course. I have it right here in the office. I'm supervising logistics for 2 other events. What do you need? I want you to confirm for me who is listed as the contract holder, who signed and who made the full bank transfer 2 weeks ago. Well, you, Miss Eleanor, you are the client. The invoice is in your name. The deposit came from your account. Your daughter Jasmine is listed only as a coordination contact, but legally the service is for you. Exactly, I said, looking toward the kitchen door where waiters were rushing in and out with trays of the main course. I am the client, and as the client I have a complaint and a new instruction. Whatever you say, Miss Eleanor, you know I owe you everything I am. If something is wrong, I'll fix it right now. Robert, I am at the party. My daughter just kicked me off the table and sent me to eat in the kitchen. She says there is no room for me. I heard a gasp on the other end of the line. Don't tell me that, but if it's your money, that is an unforgivable lack of respect. It is, and I do not intend to eat in the kitchen, Robert. In fact, I have decided that the quality of service does not meet my current standards of dignity. What do you want me to do? Asked Robert. And I noticed in his voice that he already intuited where I was going. He knew my character. He knew I was fair, but that I never left a debt uncollected, nor an offense unanswered. I want you to stop the service right now. Excuse me. Robert hesitated. manner, the guests are waiting for the main course. The roast beef with au juice is already plated. You haven't understood me. I don't want them to serve the beef. I want your guys to pack everything up. The plates, the glasses, the bottles of wine that I paid for, the silverware, everything. And I want you to withdraw. Miss Eleanor, that's going to be chaos. There are 300 people. Your daughter is going to sue me. She can't sue you, Robert. The contract is with me, and I am canceling the service due to breach of moral clauses. I will protect you. You have my word. Besides, I already paid you. Keep the money as compensation for the trouble of packing up early, but I don't want a single bite more served at this party. There was a brief silence. I imagined Robert in his office running a hand through his hair, debating between professional duty and personal loyalty toward the woman who taught him how to cook. All right, Miss Eleanor, he finally said. You're the boss. When do you want us to start? I looked at my watch. It was 9 o'clock at night on the dot. Through the half-open door, I saw that the DJ was announcing the toast. Jasmine was standing with the microphone in her hand, ready to give a speech about family, love, and effort. What irony. Now I ordered, and Robert, tell the head waiter to start with the head. Understood. I'm communicating with the captain by radio. Give me 2 minutes. I hung up the phone. I stayed there in the gloom of the hallway, feeling a strange mixture of adrenaline and peace. It wasn't revenge, I told myself. It was justice. It was education. If my daughter wanted to treat me like an invisible employee, then she would learn what happens when the staff decides they've had enough. I moved a little closer to the entrance of the hall to observe. I saw the head waiter, a tall, serious man, put his hand to his earpiece. His expression changed. He nodded several times, confused at first. Then, firmly, he made a discreet signal to his team. Jasmine started speaking. Good evening, everyone, said my daughter with that honeyed voice she uses when she wants to appear like a society lady. Today we celebrate my Princess Maya. I want to thank everyone for being here. It has been an enormous effort to organize this. While she was speaking, I saw the first waiter approach a side table. Instead of serving wine, he took the full bottle that was in the center of the table and put it on his tray. The guest looked at him, bewildered. Another waiter near the dance floor began to remove the silver charger plates. Jasmine kept talking, blind to what was happening around her. Because family is the most important thing. It is the pillar that sustains us. The head waiter went up to the platform. Jasmine stopped, annoyed by the interruption. What is it? I'm talking, she whispered, moving the microphone away, but it was heard over the speakers. The captain didn't answer her. He made a hand signal toward the sound and light booth where the technical team was, who casually also used to work with Robert in my time. Suddenly, the background music, which had been playing softly, cut out with a dry screech. Silence fell over the hall like a heavy blanket. The 300 guests stopped murmuring. Jasmine looked everywhere, looking for the organizer, looking for an explanation. What is happening? She shouted, losing her composure. Chloe, fix this now. Why did they take the bottles? Then it happened. Just as Robert must have coordinated in that quick call to the technical team. The immense crystal chandeliers that illuminated the hall flickered once, twice, and then everything went out. The darkness was total. Screams of surprise were heard and the sound of glasses falling to the floor in the confusion. In the midst of that blackness, I pressed the silver server against my chest and knew that the Real party was just about to begin. The darkness wasn't total. Of course, in these modern times, absolute darkness is a luxury that no longer exists. As soon as the power cut and the silence of surprise broke with the first nervous murmurs, hundreds of cell phone screens lit up like fireflies in a night field. Those cold white and blue lights illuminated shocked faces, open mouths and eyes searching for answers in the gloom. I stood still in my corner near the service door. My eyes, accustomed to watching dining rooms from the shadows during a 30-year career, adapted quickly. I didn't feel fear. On the contrary, I felt a strange solid calm, like wet cement hardening. It was the calm of someone who knows exactly what is happening when everyone else thinks the world is falling apart. I heard Jasmine's voice, shrill and desperate, screaming from the platform. Please remain calm. It must be a fuse. Chloe, fix this right now. The society lady had vanished in a second. Only a capricious child remained, scared of the dark. I took a step back and pushed the swinging door to enter the kitchen area and the service hallway. There, the emergency lights, rectangular lamps with yellowish lights stuck to the wall, gave the atmosphere the look of an underground bunker. The controlled chaos that is typically a catering kitchen was frozen. The staff from Laurel Catering stood like statues with trays half raised or half lowered. Upon seeing me enter, they didn't look at me like the rejected grandmother of the party. They looked at me like soldiers awaiting confirmation from their general. That was my hidden resource. It wasn't money, even though I had paid for the party. It wasn't legal documents, even though the contract was in my name. My true resource was loyalty and professional authority, something my daughter would never understand because she had never worked a real day in her life. She believed power came from shouting at employees. I knew power came from knowing their names and having taught them the trade. I walked toward the central stainless steel table where the platters of roast beef rested, which would no longer reach the tables. The smell of the hot, rich meat filled the air. I ran my hand along the cold edge of the metal table. "Miss Ella Laner," said a voice to my right. It was Matthew, the head chef who was there supervising the final plating. A robust man with old burns on his forearms, war marks of our trade. He took off his white hat as a sign of respect. "Good evening, Matthew," I replied naturally, as if I hadn't just sabotaged the social event of the year. "Robert communicated the order to you?" "Yes, ma'am." Immediate withdrawal. But Matthew looked toward the swinging doors through which my daughter's screams filtered. "Are we really leaving? We have 300 plates ready. It's a lot of food, ma'am. It's a waste." "It won't be wasted. Matthew, pack everything into the thermal containers. St. Jude Senior Center on the other side of the avenue will be delighted to receive a luxury dinner tonight. I will call the director myself in a moment." Matthew's eyes shone. He remembered. He remembered that I always said, "Food is sacred and is not thrown away." "Understood, Miss Ella Laner." "All right, guys," he shouted, clapping once with force. "You heard the boss. Pack it up. Zippers closed. I want the silver equipment in its boxes in 5 minutes. Move." The kitchen came to life, but it wasn't the frenetic rhythm of serving. It was the precise and military rhythm of dismantling. Watching them work was like listening to a symphony that I myself had composed years ago. I leaned against a metal wire shelf and observed. For the last 5 years since Jasmine convinced me to retire and rest, I had felt useless. I had become just another piece of furniture in the house, a wallet with legs that served to pay the bills and watch the child when Jasmine wanted to go out. They had made me believe that my time had passed, that my opinions were outdated, that my presence clashed. How wrong they were. I looked at my hands. Those hands had kneaded thousands of loaves of bread. They had carried heavy boxes, signed checks, and contracts. Those hands had built the wealth that Jasmine was squandering. For years, I allowed my daughter to make me feel small. I did it out of love, or so I told myself. I thought, poor daughter of mine. She is alone. She is stressed. I justified her bad manners, her rudeness, her forgetfulness. But today, by sending me to the kitchen, Jasmine hadn't just insulted me. She had insulted my history. She had sent me to the place she considered a punishment, a place for servants. What she ignored in her immense blindness of new money is that the kitchen is the heart of power. Here it is decided who eats and who goes hungry. Here it is decided if the party is a success or a disaster. She sent me to my kingdom, thinking it was my prison. The kitchen door burst open, hitting the wall violently. Chloe, the organizer, entered. She was sweating, her makeup smeared, and her earpiece dangling by the wire. Her eyes scanned the kitchen in panic until they found me. "You!" she shrieked, pointing at me with an accusing finger that trembled. "What did you do?" "The lights. The waiters are clearing the tables in the middle of the dark. Tell them to stop." I stood up to my full height. 68 years old, my back sometimes hurts. But in that moment my spine felt made of steel. "Good evening again, Chloe," I said with a tranquility that threw her off. "I see you found the way to the kitchen. Are you coming to join me? According to my daughter, this is the appropriate place for people who are surplus." "Stop playing games," she shouted. Advancing toward me, Matthew took a step forward, interposing himself subtly between her and me with a chef's knife in his hand that he was cleaning with a cloth. It wasn't a threat. It was a barrier of protection. Chloe stopped dead in her tracks. Ms. Jasmine is hysterical. You have to fix this. You paid, yes, but you can't cancel just like that. There is a contract. I smiled. I reached into my bag and took out not the cake server but my phone. I opened the PDF file that Robert had sent me months ago when I signed the estimate. You are right, Chloe. There is a contract. I advanced toward her, forcing her to step back. Clause 14, Section B. The client reserves the right to cancel or suspend service at any time if they consider that the conditions of the event threaten their moral or physical integrity. Chloe blinked, confused. Moral integrity, she stammered. Nobody hit you. We just asked you to sit here. Public humiliation is an attack on integrity, my dear. And I assure you that any judge in this city, many of whom have eaten from my banquets for decades, will agree with me. But the guest's Jasmine's image, Chloe was collapsing. Her world of perfect events and Instagram photos was crumbling because of an old woman in a wine-colored dress. Jasmine's image is Jasmine's problem, I said, putting the phone away. You are the organizer. Organize. You have 300 people in the dark and without food. I suggest you find pizza and candles. Lots of candles. Chloe opened her mouth to reply, but a crash from the ballroom interrupted her. Someone had tripped over a chair in the dark, and the unmistakable sound of breaking glass and a cry of pain was heard. Oh my God! Exclaimed Chloe, and ran back to the hall, forgetting about me. I turned back to the employees. They already had almost everything packed. The thermal boxes were sealed. The silver trays were being wrapped in cloths. Manor, said Matthew. The loading dock is clear. The truck is on the ramp. We are leaving now. I nodded. But then an idea crossed my mind. A strategic idea. Leaving now would be effective. Yes, it would leave the party without food and without light. But I needed something else. I needed to see. I needed Jasmine to understand that this wasn't a technical accident, but a lesson taught by the hand that fed her. Matthew, take the guys and the food. Let the truck leave now for the shelter. But leave me one thing. What do you need, ma'am? Leave me the control box for the emergency lights. I know Robert installed an independent system for the kitchen and hallways. And I want you to leave a single table set right here in the center of the kitchen. A table? Yes. With the best tablecloth you have, the Egyptian linen one. A silver candelabra with 3 candles and a single full place setting. China plate. Silver cutlery. Crystal goblet. For whom? Asked Matthew, although he already suspected the answer. For me. If my daughter wanted me to be in the kitchen, I will be in the kitchen. But I won't be hidden eating leftovers. I will be presiding over my own banquet in the middle of the disaster she caused herself. Matthew smiled. He understood the theater of the situation. In 2 minutes, his guy set up a table worthy of a queen in the middle of the industrial kitchen. They placed the candelabra and lit the candles. The soft light of the flames danced on the stainless steel of the empty counters. Go with God, boys, I told them. Robert will pay you for the full shift, plus a bonus from me. The waiters went out the back door carrying the last boxes. The noise of the truck engine starting was heard outside, and then it moved away. I was left alone in the kitchen, save for the hum of the refrigerators and the growing murmur of panic coming from the main hall. I sat at the solitary table. The chair was comfortable. I smoothed my dress, took the cake server out of my bag, and placed it on the immaculate tablecloth shining in the candle light. It looked like a sword at rest. Now came the second part of my plan. The electricity in the main hall wouldn't come back on by itself. I knew where the general control panel was. It was in a utility closet, accessed precisely from the kitchen. Robert had given me the master key years ago. A copy I kept on my keychain out of habit. That quirk of old women having keys to everything just in case. I got up and walked toward the small gray door at the back of the kitchen. I opened it. There were the breakers. I could flip the switch and return the light to the hall in an instant. I could end the darkness and let them see that the food was gone. But no, not yet. First they had to come looking for me. They had to feel the need. Jasmine had to come down from her pedestal, cross the darkness, humble herself before the guests, and come to the kitchen, not to order me to sit, but to ask for my help. I heard hurried steps and heels hitting the wooden floor of the ballroom, approaching the swinging doors. They were furious steps. Mama. Jasmine's scream sounded muffled by the door. I know you're in there. Chloe told me you're talking to the waiters. I smiled inwardly. I sat back down at my table, took the linen napkin, and placed it elegantly on my lap. I crossed my hands on the table and fixed my gaze on the door. The door opened, but Jasmine didn't enter alone. The light from several cell phone flashlights illuminated the entrance. Behind my daughter, I saw familiar faces. There was Jasmine's father-in-law, a pompous man who always looked down on me. There was the mother of Maya's best friend, a gossipy woman named Gladys. And there was Maya, my granddaughter, with her makeup smeared by tears, lighting the way with her latest model phone. Everyone stopped dead at the scene. They expected to find an old woman crying in a corner or perhaps arguing with the staff. Instead, they found an empty, clean, and silent kitchen. And in the center, illuminated by the spectral light of 3 tall candles, was me, sitting with a straight back, reigning over nothing, with a dignity that filled the space more than any furniture. Jasmine panted, her chest rising and falling from rage and the effort of walking in the dark. Her gold dress now looked like a cheap costume under the harsh light of the flashlights. Mama, she said, and her voice wavered. The image disconcerted her. It didn't fit her narrative of victimhood. What does this mean? Where is the food? Why did the waiters leave? My guests are hungry. I looked her in the eyes, not with hate, but with a deep and quiet disappointment. The family table was full, daughter, I said softly. My voice resonated in the tiled acoustics of the kitchen. So I dismissed the service. I didn't want anyone else to clash with your aesthetic. You dismissed? Jasmine looked about to faint. You can't do that. I organized this. You organized the decoration, Jasmine. You chose the flowers and the dresses. But the contract for the food, the drink, and the service, I signed that, and I decide when the banquet ends. A murmur ran through the small group of spectators. Behind her, Gladys, the gossip, covered her mouth with her hand. Jasmine's father-in-law frowned, assessing the situation, realizing for the first time who really had financial control of the family. Grandma, please, moaned Maya, stepping forward. Her teenage voice was cracked. My friends are leaving. Everything is dark. It's my party. I looked at my granddaughter, the girl I had raised, whom I had spoiled, and who hadn't even greeted me upon arrival, who hadn't looked up from her cell phone to defend me when her mother kicked me off the table. It is your party, Maya, I nodded. And I regret that it ends like this. But there are lessons that aren't learned in school or on TikTok. They are learned in life. I stood up slowly. The sound of the chair dragging against the floor was the only noise in the room. I picked up the silver cake server. The candle light reflected on the polished metal, casting a flash on Jasmine's face. Do you want light? I asked, holding the server as if it were a scepter. I can give you light, but the food is no longer here. The beef, the appetizers, the cake. Everything is on its way to where it will be appreciated. Are you crazy? Hissed Jasmine, approaching dangerously. You are going to pay for this. I am going to be the laughingstock of the city. You already are, Jasmine, I replied implacably. But not because of me, but because you treated the hand that feeds you as if it were trash. And now that hand has closed. I advanced toward the utility closet. The group parted to let me pass like the Red Sea before Moses. No one dared to touch me. There was a new strength in me. Static electricity that seemed to emanate from my skin. I was no longer Ella Laner, the kind widow. I was Eleanor, the aggrieved matriarch. I reached the door of the electrical panel. I put my hand on the switch. I'm going to turn on the lights, I announced without looking back, so that everyone can see well how they gather their things and leave, and so that you, Jasmine, can look at the face of every single guest you failed because of your arrogance. I flipped the switch with a dry snap. An electric hum ran through the building. Suddenly, artificial light flooded the kitchen, killing the magic of my candles, revealing the harshness of the white tiles and the pale, sweaty faces of my family. A collective "oh" was heard from the main hall when the crystal chandeliers shone again. But the music didn't return. The silence persisted, now illuminated. I passed by my daughter without stopping. She was shaking with clenched fists, unable to articulate a word. Maya was crying silently. I left the kitchen toward the main hall. I needed to see the full scenario. I needed them to see me. I wasn't going to hide in the shadows or the service hallways anymore. I entered the Grand Crystal Palace ballroom. The light was blinding after so much darkness. 300 pairs of eyes turned toward me. They saw me come out of the kitchen alone with my wine-colored dress and my head held high. They saw the tables empty of food, the glasses half drunk, the general bewilderment. I walked toward the center of the empty dance floor. I didn't have a microphone, but I didn't need one. My presence filled the void that the music had left. I searched with my gaze for my contemporaries, those ladies of my age who before had looked at me with pity. Now they looked at me with something else. It was fear. It was awe. In the eyes of an older woman sitting at table 4, I saw something unmistakable, a spark of envy and admiration. Jasmine came out of the kitchen behind me, running, trying to regain control of her narrative. "Ladies and gentlemen," shouted my daughter with a broken voice. "A small technical problem. The food. The food is coming." She was lying. And everyone knew it because everyone had seen the waiters leave with the thermal boxes through the side door. I stopped in the middle of the dance floor. Jasmine arrived at my side panting and grabbed my arm. She squeezed hard, digging her nails into me. "Fix it," she whispered in my ear with venom. "Call Robert. Make them come back now or I swear you won't see Maya again." That threat, the card she always played, the emotional blackmail. Before that would have made me run to beg for forgiveness. Before the fear of loneliness would have buckled my knees, but something had broken in that darkness. Or perhaps something had been fixed. I pulled loose from her grip with a sharp movement that made her stumble. I looked at her and for the first time in years I saw my daughter not as the child I had to protect, but as an adult woman who needed to learn that actions have consequences. "No, Jasmine," I said loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "The party is over and Grandma is going home." I took a step toward the main exit, but then a voice resonated from the back of the hall, a masculine and deep voice that stopped my march. "One moment, Miss Eleanor." I turned. It was the owner of the venue, Mr. Henderson, a man with whom I had negotiated the rental months ago. He was walking toward me with a firm step, but his face showed no anger. It showed curiosity. The night was just beginning to reveal its true cards. Mr. Henderson stopped 2 steps from me, with his hands clasped in front, in that diplomatic posture only business owners who have seen everything have. Jasmine smiled with a triumphant grimace, wiping a fake tear from her cheek. Surely she thought the owner of the Crystal Palace was coming to restore order, and in her head restoring order meant removing the problematic old woman who had interrupted her spectacle. "Mr. Henderson." My daughter stepped forward with a high and tremulous voice. "What a shame. Truly. My mother is well, you see, she is having an episode. I beg you to call security to escort her to the exit. We don't want any more scenes." The man, impeccable in his gray suit, didn't even look at Jasmine. His dark eyes, framed by fine-rimmed glasses, were fixed on me. He completely ignored the woman in the gold dress, who was waving her hands like a broken windmill. "Miss Eleanor," he said with a deep and respectful voice, "my floor managers informed me that the catering service has withdrawn by your order. I just wanted to confirm if you wish to keep the rental of the hall until 2 in the morning, as the contract stipulates, or if you prefer that we proceed to the early closing of the facilities." The silence that followed that question was heavier than the previous darkness. Jasmine opened her mouth but no sound came out. Chloe, the organizer, dropped her clipboard to the floor. The nearby guests craned their necks, incredulous. I held Mr. Henderson's gaze. He knew who signed the checks. He knew who had paid the deposit 6 months ago in cash. Bill upon bill, fruit of the sale of land in the South. "The hall stays open, Mr. Henderson," I replied calmly. "I paid for the space and for the air conditioning. My guests, or rather my daughter's guests, have the right to enjoy the roof. Just because there is no food doesn't mean there is no party, right? As you order, Miss Eleanor." Henderson gave a slight bow with his head. "If you need my security staff to assist with anything else internal, just raise your hand." "Thank you, but I think my daughter and I can resolve this." The owner withdrew with the same discretion with which he arrived. Jasmine stood there paralyzed, processing the fact that her authority at that party was as fake as the eyelashes she was wearing. "Do you realize what you have done?" whispered Jasmine, approaching me with clenched teeth so others wouldn't see her fury. "Everyone is waiting for dinner. I have the mayor's wife at table 5. I have my ex-husband's partners watching. We'll tell them to dance, daughter." I answered her, smoothing an invisible wrinkle on my dress. Dancing is free. The food, unfortunately, requires respect. And the respect ran out half an hour ago. I walked toward the tables, moving away from her. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to make a spectacle. My strategy now was silence and presence. I was going to be the ghost haunting the banquet, reminding everyone that the structure sustaining them was me. I approached table number 4 where I had seen that lady looking at me badly before. Gladys, an old neighbor from the neighborhood who moved to a residential area as soon as her husband made some money with a hardware store. She was always pretentious. Now she had an empty glass in front of her and looked with desperation toward the kitchen. "Good evening, Gladys," I said with a kind smile. "Nice to see you. How are your grandkids?" She looked at me bewildered by my tranquility. "Eleanor, this is unheard of. We are hungry. Where is the food?" Jasmine said there was a technical problem. "Oh no, Gladys. There is no technical problem. The problem is one of moral budget." I spoke loud enough for the table next door to hear too. Jasmine decided that the family table was too full for her mother, so I decided to lighten the economic load of the party so she wouldn't feel pressured. You know how young people are. They want everything without giving anything. Gladys turned red. The woman next to her, an elegant lady with lots of jewelry, let out a nervous little laugh. "Are you telling us you took the food because your daughter slighted you?" asked the woman with the jewelry. "I took the food because I paid for it, ma'am," I replied sweetly. "And because I prefer that the seniors at St. Jude's shelter, who do know how to say thank you, eat it, rather than it being wasted at a party where the hostess hides her mother in the kitchen." The rumor spread like wildfire. I saw heads coming together, whispers traveling from table to table. She sent her to the kitchen. It was the mother who paid for everything. Jasmine didn't put in a dime. Jasmine's narrative, that image of a successful and modern woman she had built with lies, was crumbling, not because of my screams, but because of my truth spoken in a low voice. Jasmine was running from one side to the other with the phone glued to her ear. I saw her arguing, gesturing. She was trying to order fast food, pizza, whatever. But I knew something she had forgotten in her hysteria. It was 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. Ordering food for 300 people without prior notice was impossible, and even more impossible if you don't have the means to pay. Chloe approached the head table where Maya was. My granddaughter was still sitting looking at the black screen of her cell phone, as if expecting a notification to save her from reality. Chloe whispered something to her and Maya shook her head, bursting into tears again. Then Jasmine came toward me again. This time she didn't bring fury. She brought panic. "Mama, please," she pleaded, and I saw sweat shining on her forehead. "I got a pizza place that can come in an hour, but I need the card, the one we used for the deposit." I looked at her with a raised eyebrow. "Your credit card is maxed out, Jasmine. You know it is with Maya's dress and the flower arrangements. Mama, don't do this to me. Lend me the card. I'll pay you back. I swear I'll pay you back." "No," I said simply and plainly. "What do you mean no? It's your granddaughter's party. You're ruining her, not me." "My granddaughter's party was ruined the moment you allowed that woman," I pointed to Chloe with my chin, "to block my path. Maya's 15, Jasmine. She is old enough to understand that if her mother bites the hand that feeds her, eventually she will go hungry." "It's just money," she shouted, forgetting to lower her voice. Several people turned around. "It's always about your damn money and how you control us with it." "It isn't control, daughter. It is dignity. And today, dignity does not finance emergency pizza." I turned around and sat in an empty chair at table 3, a table assigned to friends from Jasmine's club. They were people I barely knew, young rich people who looked at me as if I were an exotic animal. I sat down with astonishing naturalness, crossed my legs and put my bag on the tablecloth. "Do you mind if I join you?" I asked. My original table seems to have disappeared. No one dared to tell me no. On the contrary, a young man poured me a glass of water from the remaining pitcher. From my new strategic position, I watched the next domino fall, the music. There was a live band hired to play after dinner and a famous DJ for the intermissions. The DJ had been playing ambient music since the lights came back on, trying to maintain the mood. But I saw a man with a folder approach the booth. It was the representative of the musicians' union. Jasmine was arguing with the pizza place on the phone, when the representative tapped her shoulder. I saw the exchange from afar. The man showed her a paper. Jasmine shook her head, pointed toward me. The man looked toward where I was, then looked at his paper and shook his head. The music contract had a specific clause. The final payment of 50% had to be made in cash or confirmed transfer before the main band went on stage. I had the envelope with the money in my bag. Jasmine knew it. She counted on me, the Doxel grandmother, to hand over the envelope discreetly at the right moment. The union representative signaled the DJ. The music stopped. Another silence, this time more uncomfortable because there was no longer darkness to hide in. "What is happening now?" shouted someone from the back. Jasmine put her hands to her head. The representative approached her and spoke hard. I could read his lips. "No payment. They don't play." My daughter looked for me with her gaze among the crowd. I was drinking my water calmly. She knew I had the money. She knew I could save the dance. She walked toward me, pushing through the tables with eyes bloodshot. "The money for the band," she said upon arriving at my table, extending her hand with the palm open like a child demanding her allowance. "Give it to me. I have no idea what you're talking about." I lied with a serenity that unhinged her. "The envelope? I saw it at your house before leaving. You have it in your bag." "Ah, that envelope. I changed my mind. I thought that since the family table was full and I clashed, perhaps my money also clashed with the quality of the artist, so I didn't bring it." "You're lying." Jasmine tried to grab my bag. It was a fatal error. The moment her hand touched the strap of my bag, I reacted not with violence, but with a quick defensive reflex, pulling the bag away. But the sudden movement caused Jasmine to lose her balance in her too high heels. She stumbled and fell to her knees on the floor, grabbing the tablecloth to avoid falling flat on her face. The tablecloth slid. Glasses of water, crystal centerpieces, and silverware fell on top of her with a spectacular crash. The entire hall stood up. Jasmine remained there on the floor, wet, surrounded by broken glass and scattered flowers. She was the living image of defeat. Maya let out a scream and ran toward her mother. Chloe covered her eyes. I remained seated with my bag firmly held in my lap. I looked my daughter in the eyes from my height. "Get up, Jasmine," I told her, not with contempt, but with the authority of a mother tired of raising an adult. "You are making a fool of yourself, and this time I am not going to clean your knees." Jasmine got up, trembling, helped by Maya. Her dress was stained and her makeup ruined. She looked around. 300 guests were watching her. They no longer saw the perfect hostess. They saw a woman who had tried to humiliate her mother, and had ended up humiliated by her own incompetence. "Let's go," Jasmine said to Maya, sobbing. "Let's get out of here." "Leave?" I asked. "But the most important thing is missing, daughter." Jasmine stopped. "What are you talking about? There is no food, no music, no party. What else do you want?" "The cake remains," I said, pointing toward the side table, where miraculously the immense 5-tier cake remained intact. It was a work of art in white and silver fondant, crowned with an M made of crystals. The cake hadn't been made by Laurel Catering. It had been made by a boutique bakery that Jasmine insisted on hiring, and that she had paid for in advance. With my card, of course, but months earlier it was the only edible thing left in the hall. "Nobody wants cake now," spat Jasmine. "On the contrary," I said, standing up. "It is the only thing they have to eat, and it is tradition. You don't want Maya to leave without blowing out her candles, right? After all, it is for her that we are here. Or have you already forgotten that this is a birthday, and not your social coronation?" The guests began to murmur in agreement. "Yes, the cake. At least a piece of sweet." Poor girl. Social pressure, that tool Jasmine loved to use against me, now turned against her. She couldn't leave. She had to cut the cake. Jasmine looked at the cake, then at Maya, then at me. "Fine," she said with a hoarse voice. "Let's cut the damn cake and get out. Chloe, bring the knife." Chloe, who had been hiding behind a column, came running toward the cake table. She searched among the arrangements, lifted the tablecloth, searched in the transport box. "Miss Jasmine," said Chloe with the voice of a scared mouse. "It's not here." "What isn't here?" "The cutting set, the silver knife and server. They aren't here. They must have gone with the kitchen waiters." Jasmine closed her eyes and took a deep breath, about to explode again. Cut it with whatever with a table knife. There are no table knives, ma'am, Chloe reminded her. They took them all. Only the dessert teaspoons remained that were in another box. The situation was tragic. A giant cake and 300 hungry people, and not a single blade to cut it. Jasmine's powerlessness was absolute. She had the object of desire in front of her, but lacked the tool to access it. That was when I took the final step of this stage. I walked slowly toward the cake table. The sound of my shoes resonated in the expectant silence. I arrived in front of the tower of sugar. I opened my bag with deliberate calm. I untied the velvet cloth inside. The shine of antique silver caught the light of the crystal chandeliers. I took out my wedding cake server, the mother-of-pearl handle with the silver blade engraved with Marcus and my initials. It was heavy antique real. It wasn't a prop like everything else at that party. "Are you looking for this?" I asked, lifting the knife so everyone could see it. Jasmine froze. She recognized the knife. She knew what it meant. "Give it to me," she said, extending her hand mechanically. "No," I replied softly. "This knife has cut the cakes of the decent women of this family for 3 generations. To cut my wedding cake. To cut yours. And it will cut Maya's. But you will not use it." I turned toward my granddaughter, who was looking at us with wide eyes as if she were seeing her grandmother for the first time in her life. "Maya, come here," I called her. The girl hesitated, looked at her mother, but hunger and shame were stronger. She approached me. "Here." I offered her the knife by the handle. "You are the celebrated one. You have the power now. Your mother cannot feed you. Your organizer cannot help you. Only your grandmother has the tool, so you don't go hungry today." Maya took the knife. Her hands were trembling. It weighed more than she expected. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered so low only I heard her. "Cut my life," I instructed her. "And remember this moment well. Remember who gave you the knife when the lights went out and everyone else only knew how to scream." Maya sank the knife into the first tear of the cake. The crunch of the fondant breaking sounded like a shot in the silent hall. Jasmine watched from the side, excluded, defeated, watching how her daughter and her mother formed a picture from which she had been erased by her own arrogance. But I knew this wasn't over. Jasmine was proud. Public humiliation wounded her, but also made her dangerous. While Maya served the first badly cut piece on a paper napkin someone handed her, I saw the look in my daughter's eyes. It wasn't repentance in her eyes. It was calculation. She was thinking about how to turn this around. She was thinking about the next morning. What she didn't know was that I had also thought about the next morning. And my plan went much further than a cake and a canceled dinner. "Enjoy the dessert," I said aloud to the guests. "It's on the house." I moved away from the table, leaving them alone with their cake and their ruins. I headed toward the exit, passing by Mr. Henderson, who winked at me discreetly. The night was young and I had one more call to make, a call that would change not only this party, but the roof under which Jasmine slept every night. Because whoever pays for the party chooses the music and whoever pays the mortgage, well, that remained to be seen. The murmur of guests abandoning the hall sounded like a swarm of angry bees. There was no more music, only the noise of chairs dragging and the clinking of cutlery people dropped onto dirty cake plates, that single sweet comfort they had received. I saw the mayor's wife leave with a grimace of disgust, shaking her head while furiously typing on her phone. Surely the gossip was already circulating in the high society group chats. Jasmine tried to stop some at the door, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace of pain, promising compensation dinners that I knew she couldn't pay for. "It was a misunderstanding with the vendor," my daughter was saying, grabbing the arm of a lady who pulled away delicately but firmly. "Next week we'll do something intimate at home." "We'll see, Jasmine. We'll see," replied the woman without looking her in the eyes, rushing her pace toward the parking lot. I stood next to a column, observing the parade of shame. I didn't feel joy, but I didn't feel guilt either. What I felt was the weight of a truth that had taken too long to fall under its own weight. Maya had taken refuge in a corner with 2 friends who stayed out of pity, eating the cake with hands stained blue from frosting, staring into space. Chloe, the organizer, had disappeared a while ago, probably fearing someone would demand a refund she couldn't give. When the last guest crossed the glass door, leaving the immense hall empty and desolate, silence returned. But this time it wasn't a silence of expectation but of ruin. The floor was sticky from soda spilled in the dark. The imported flowers that cost a fortune were already beginning to wilt under the excessive air conditioning. Jasmine closed the main door and turned slowly. Her face no longer held the social mask. It was disfigured by pure hate. She walked toward me, heels clicking with force, ignoring the broken glass crunching under her soles. "Are you happy?" she shouted at me, and her voice bounced off the empty walls. "Are you satisfied, Eleanor? You have destroyed your granddaughter's social life. No one is going to forget this. We are the joke of the city." "Dignity is never a joke, Jasmine," I replied, keeping my tone low, which seemed to infuriate her more. "And if your friends judge you for a failed dinner and not for your character, then they weren't friends. They were parasites." "Shut up," she shrieked, approaching until I could smell the stale champagne on her breath. "You have no right to give me lessons. You're just a bitter old woman who can't stand to see others shine. But this is over." Jasmine ran her hands through her messy hair, breathing agitatedly, looking for how to hurt me, how to regain the control she had lost in front of 300 people. Her eyes shone with a malice that hurt me to recognize in my own daughter. "Tonight you take your things and get out," she sentenced, pointing to the exit with a trembling finger. "I don't want you in my house. I don't want you near Maya. Tomorrow I'm changing the lock. Go to a home. Go under a bridge. I don't care. But you are never entering my house again." There was the final threat, the card she believed was an ace up her sleeve. For years, Jasmine had acted like the lady and mistress of the residence in Buckhead, that big pretty house with a garden where she hosted her gatherings and where I occupied the guest room on the ground floor for convenience. I laughed. It was a dry, short laugh. "Your house?" I asked, tilting my head. "Yes, my house where you live as a moocher because you feel lonely. But charity is over, Mama." Out. I took my phone out of my bag one more time. The screen glowed with the notification from my bank, confirming the moves I had scheduled while I was sitting in the darkness of the kitchen, illuminated by those 3 candles. "Jasmine, sit down," I said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. "I'm not going to sit down. I want you to go." I said, "Sit down." I raised my voice for the first time all night, a tone of command I used with difficult vendors 20 years ago. Jasmine, surprised by the change of tone, stepped back and dropped into a plastic chair the waiters hadn't managed to collect. Maya approached timidly, sensing the storm hadn't ended. "Let's talk about your house," I began, walking slowly around her. "That house we bought 10 years ago when you got divorced and didn't have a pot to piss in. Remember who gave the down payment?" "You gave it as a gift," stammered Jasmine, crossing her arms defensively. "Exactly. I gave the down payment. But who has paid the mortgage month after month for the last decade? Who pays the property tax? Who pays the HOA fees? So you have private security and landscapers? You give me the money to pay it." "It's the same thing," she said with disdain. "It's my family allowance." I corrected. "It was your allowance. You see, daughter, you made a calculation error. You thought money was a right, not a privilege. You thought the house was in your name because I let you play the owner." Jasmine paused slightly, but her arrogance remained intact. "The house is in my name on the deed," she said, though her voice trembled a little. "Daddy said it would be for me. Your father died before we bought that house, Jasmine. And yes, the deed mentions you as a resident beneficiary. But the title, the legal ownership, and the responsibility for the mortgage loan are mine. They have always been mine. I did it that way to protect you from your bad financial decisions. And boy was I right." Jasmine stayed silent, processing the information. Her eyes moved from one side to the other, looking for an exit, an argument. "You can't kick me out. I have a daughter. I have rights." "Nobody is kicking you out, Jasmine," I said calmly, taking out a tissue to wipe an imaginary spot on my hand. "You can stay in the house as long as you want, but the conditions have changed." I looked at my cell phone screen and then looked at her. 20 minutes ago, while they were cutting that dry cake. I logged into the bank app. I have canceled the mortgage autopay. I have also canceled the automatic transfers to your personal account. And of course I have reported the additional credit cards that you and Maya use as lost. "What?" Jasmine jumped up as if the chair had springs. "You can't do that. The bank is going to charge interest. They are going to cut off our lights. Probably unless you pay." Pay with what? You are 42 years old, Jasmine. You have a degree in communications even though you have never used it. You have health. You have contacts. Or at least you had them before tonight. It is time you start paying for your house. Jasmine took out her own phone frantically. Her fingers with that perfect gel manicure that costs what I spent on food for a week tapped the screen. She entered her banking app. I saw her jaw drop. The color disappeared from her face, leaving her grayish under the artificial light. It's at zero, she whispered, horrified. The checking account, you left it at zero. No, daughter. You left it at zero. You spent the last of it on the deposit for that gold dress you're wearing. I simply stopped refilling the bottomless pit. But I have to pay the pizza place, she shouted on the verge of hysteria. They are calling me. They are on their way. If I don't pay the cancellation fee, they are going to sue me. That is an excellent problem for an adult independent woman, I said without flinching. Welcome to the real world, Jasmine. In the real world, if you insult the person who finances you, you lose your financing. Maya, who had been listening to everything with wide eyes, dropped the plate of cake and burst into tears. Grandma, are we going to be poor? She asked with that selfish innocence of teenagers who only know abundance. I approached my granddaughter. I didn't look at her with harshness but with sadness. She was collateral damage of Jasmine's parenting, but she was also complicit through her silence and apathy. No, Maya, you aren't going to be poor. You have a roof and you have health. What you are going to have to do is work. Maybe that way you'll learn that people are worth what they are, not where they sit at a table. Jasmine let herself fall back into the chair, defeated. The blow had been accurate. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't an insult. It was the clean surgical cut of the gold umbilical cord that had sustained her all her life. She looked at her empty hands, then looked at the deserted hall. Her fantasy empire had evaporated the moment I turned off the tap. How am I going to get home? Asked Jasmine in a whisper with the voice of a small child. The chauffeur left. I have no balance on the rideshare app because it was linked to your card. The irony was delicious. The woman who had sent me to the kitchen, the one who wanted to kick me out of the house, now didn't even have a way to cross the city. She was trapped in her own crystal palace, dressed in gala attire and without a dime in her pocket. I don't know, Jasmine, I replied, slinging my bag over my shoulder. I suppose you can call one of those rich friends who came to the party. Surely one will be delighted to come pick you up and lend you money, right? Jasmine lowered her head. She knew the answer. Those friends wouldn't lift a finger if there wasn't a benefit involved. I headed toward the exit. My steps resonated firmly. My knees didn't hurt anymore. Adrenaline and the feeling of justice are a powerful painkiller. Upon reaching the door, I met the security guard, the same one who had hesitated to let me in. Now he looked at me with absolute respect, almost with fear. He opened the door wide for me. Good evening, Miss Eleanor, he said. Good evening, son. I went out into the fresh night air. The street was quiet. A black, modest but clean car was waiting at the curb. It wasn't a private chauffeur. It was an Uber that I myself had ordered with my account, the only one that had funds. The driver rolled down the window. Miss Eleanor Vance. Yes, that's me. I opened the back door of the car. Before entering, I looked back toward the illuminated facade of the event hall. Through the glass, I saw my daughter and my granddaughter sitting in the middle of the empty immensity. Two small gold figures surrounded by garbage and silence. They looked like castaways on an island of fake luxury. For a second, the mother instinct pricked my chest. The urge to go back, take out the card, fix their lives once more. Poor things, I thought. They don't know how to do anything. But then I remembered the kitchen. I remembered the organizer's look of contempt. I remembered Jasmine laughing with her friends while I was pushed toward the service door. I remembered years of silence, of subtle slights, of being treated like an ATM without feelings. No more. I entered the car and closed the door. The sound was definitive. Where are we going, ma'am? Asked the driver. I gave him the address of my house. My house? I knew Jasmine and Maya would arrive eventually, perhaps in an hour, perhaps in 2. When Jasmine's pride broke enough to ask me for help over the phone, or when she managed to convince some sucker. But when they arrived, they would find a very different reality. Hey, everything okay at the party? Commented the driver, looking at me through the rearview mirror. Looks like it ended early. The party ended when it had to end, I replied, leaning my head back on the seat and closing my eyes. Sometimes, young man, you have to turn off the light so people learn to see what really matters. The car started moving away from the Crystal Palace. While the city lights passed by the window, I felt an immense peace. I had reclaimed my name. I had reclaimed my money, but most importantly, I had reclaimed myself. However, I knew the final battle would be tomorrow when the sun rose and the real bills had to be paid. Jasmine wouldn't give up so easily. She is my daughter after all, and has my stubbornness, even if she uses it for evil. But I had something she didn't have. The key to the door and ownership of the land we stood on. Tomorrow breakfast would have a very different taste in that house. It would no longer be grandma serving soft-boiled eggs and coffee. Tomorrow, whoever wanted to eat would have to learn how to turn on the stove. The phone vibrated in my bag. It was a message from Jasmine. I didn't open it. I let it vibrate. A small reminder that power had changed hands. Now it was she who waited for an answer. And I would take all the time in the world to give it to her. I woke up before the sun as I have done for the last 40 years. The difference was that this morning I didn't feel that oppression in my chest, that weight of the endless list of tasks to please others. Upon opening my eyes, I saw the light of dawn filtering through the curtains, painting the walls of my room gold. It was my house, my walls, my silence. I got up and put on my cotton robe, that old comfortable one that Jasmine always said I should throw away because it looked poor. I tightened it with pleasure. I went down the stairs enjoying the creaking of the wood, a sound I know by heart. Passing through the living room, I saw the traces of my daughter and granddaughter's nocturnal arrival. A high-heeled shoe thrown near the entrance, a designer bag tossed on the sofa, and the house keys, the ones they had to use because I didn't get up to open for them, on the phone table. I entered the kitchen. My kitchen was no longer the scene of a pitched battle, or the corner for punishments. It was my sanctuary. I started heating water for fresh coffee just how I like it, not the insipid capsule coffee Jasmine insisted on buying. While the rich aroma filled the air, I took out the cast iron skillet, prepared some scrambled eggs with sausage, toasted some bread, and cut up a little fruit. I served everything on my favorite plate, a blue ceramic one that survived the moves. I sat at the head of the dining room table, not in the kitchen, but in the main dining room where the morning light comes in. I had just taken the first sip of my coffee when I heard dragging steps coming down the stairs. Jasmine appeared in the doorway. She looked terrible. The mascara from the night before hadn't been fully cleaned off. Her hair was matted and she wore an old t-shirt. Her eyes were puffy. She stopped upon seeing me sitting there eating breakfast with a calm that must have seemed insulting to her. "Good morning," I said without stopping cutting a piece of toast. Jasmine blinked, confused by the normality of the scene. She approached the table, dragging her feet, and dropped into the chair to my right. "My head hurts," she murmured, bringing her hands to her temples. "It was hell getting a ride last night. A friend of Gladys brought us, but she charged me for gas. It was humiliating, Mama." She waited for my response. She waited for the poor baby, or the "do you want an aspirin?" But I kept eating. "The coffee is in the pot?" I pointed with my fork. "Help yourself." Jasmine looked at the empty table in front of her. "And my breakfast?" she asked with that automatic tone of someone who has never had to ask for anything. "In the refrigerator," I replied calmly. "There are eggs. There is ham. And I think there is some cheese left. The gas is off, but the stove works. You aren't going to serve me?" Her voice trembled, oscillating between rage and tears. "Mama, for God's sake, I'm exhausted. Last night you destroyed us." I left the silverware on the plate gently. I wiped my mouth with the napkin and looked at her fixedly. "No, Jasmine. Last night I saved you. I saved you from continuing to live a lie you cannot afford. And about breakfast, the kitchen is open, but the restaurant service is canceled permanently, just like the party." Jasmine got up abruptly, making the chair. "Screech. You are incredible. You enjoy seeing us suffer. What I enjoy is seeing reality, daughter. And the reality is that you are 42 years old and have 2 healthy hands. If you want to eat, you cook. If you want to live here, you contribute." At that moment, Maya came down. She had a washed face and looked more like a child, less disguised as a femme fatale. She stood on the last step, observing the tension between us. She looked at my plate. Then she looked at her mother, who was red with anger in front of the cold stove, not knowing where to start. Maya said nothing. She walked toward the pantry, took out the box of oatmeal in a bowl. Then she went to the refrigerator for the milk. She did it in silence with clumsy movements, but she did it. She prepared her cereal and sat at the table far from me, but also far from her mother. "Thanks for the knife, Grandma," she said suddenly without looking up from her bowl. I stopped with the coffee cup halfway to my mouth. "Excuse me. The cake knife," murmured Maya. "Thank you. If you hadn't given it to me, I wouldn't have been able to cut the cake. It was the only thing we ate. And well, my friend said you looked pretty badass when you turned off the lights." I almost spit out the coffee. Badass. I assumed it was a compliment in her modern language. I smiled slightly. "You're welcome, Maya. Learn to use the tools you have, not the ones you wish you had." Jasmine looked at the two of us, feeling excluded from that small connection. She huffed, took an apple from the fruit bowl, and went out to the garden to make calls, surely to try to sell some of her jewelry or borrow money. I let her be. Hunger is a strict but effective teacher. I finished my breakfast, washed my plate and only my plate, and dressed not in house clothes, but in a beige suit and comfortable shoes. I had a pending visit. I left the house and walked to the avenue to take the bus. I hadn't gotten on one in years. Jasmine always insisted that we don't use public transportation. What nonsense. The bus was clean, half empty being Sunday, and the driver greeted me with kindness. I paid my fare with my change and sat next to the window watching my city go by. I felt part of the world again. Not a prisoner in an ivory tower. I arrived at St. Jude's Senior Center 20 minutes later. It was an old building with brick walls and a central courtyard full of bougainvillea. Upon crossing the gate, the smell of cleanliness and homemade stew greeted me. Miss Eleanor. The director, a short and energetic woman named Sister Lucy, came to meet me with open arms. "What a blessing to see you. You don't know the stir you caused last night." "I hope I didn't cause you any trouble, sister," I said, accepting her hug. "Trouble?" Sister Lucy laughed, and the wrinkles of her eyes crinkled with joy. "It was a miracle. The residents couldn't believe it. Salmon roast beef, those fancy appetizers. Mr. Anselm, the one who never eats, went back for seconds. He said he felt like he was at a royal wedding." We walked toward the common dining room. There were dozens of seniors, some in wheelchairs, others playing dominoes. Upon seeing me enter, a respectful silence fell, followed by spontaneous applause. "There is the godmother," shouted one. My eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of immense gratitude. At my granddaughter's party, my presence clashed. Here my presence was celebrated. The food that Jasmine despised for not being served on time, or because the table wasn't perfect, had been a feast for kings. Here I sat with them, listened to their stories. Mr. Anselm told me the beef was so tender he didn't need his dentures. Miss Martha told me that Robert's waiters had been gentlemen, serving them with the same elegance as if they were at the Crystal Palace. "You gave us dignity, Miss Eleanor," Sister Lucy told me upon saying goodbye, taking my hands. Sometimes society forgets that old folks also have a palate and a desire to celebrate. "Thank you." I left the shelter with a swollen heart. I had converted an act of revenge into an act of love, and in the process I had understood something fundamental. My value doesn't depend on how much money I give to my family, but on the human quality of my actions. I returned home past noon. Upon entering, I noticed a change in the atmosphere. There were no screams, no television on. I found Jasmine in the living room, sitting on the floor, surrounded by designer bags, red-soled shoes, and some evening gowns. She was taking photos of them with her cell phone. I stopped in the door frame. She looked up. Her eyes were red, but there was no longer that blind fury of the morning. There was resignation. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Jish, I have to pay the pizza guy," she said with a hoarse voice without looking at me. "He is threatening to blast me on social media if I don't pay the penalty today. I am selling the Gucci bag and the shoes I used at my cousin's wedding." I nodded slowly. "It's a good start," I said. Jasmine dropped the phone in her lap and sighed. A long sigh that seemed to let out years of stale air from her lungs. "Mama," she began, and her voice broke. "I'm scared. I don't know how to do anything. I'm 42 years old and my resume is empty. What am I going to do?" I approached her. I didn't stoop to her level. I stood firm like the pillar I am. You are going to start from the bottom, Jasmine, like I did, like your father did. Tomorrow you are going to go to the employment agency. You aren't going to look for a manager or director job. You are going to look for whatever job there is. Receptionist, sales clerk, assistant. But how embarrassing. My friends, your friends don't pay your mortgage. I cut her off. And shame is lost when you earn your first honest paycheck. I am going to support you, daughter. You have a roof. You have basic food. But the money for your luxuries, for your outings, and to maintain appearances that you earn yourself. Jasmine nodded, swallowing her pride. It was a small gesture, but it was the first real gesture of maturity I had seen in decades. I went to the kitchen. Maya was there in front of the sink. She had rubber gloves on, yellow ones that were too big for her. She was washing the breakfast dishes. There was water everywhere and soap even on the floor, but she was scrubbing. "Grandma," she said upon seeing me, a little ashamed. I didn't know how to turn on the dishwasher, so well, I used the sponge. I approached and saw she was scrubbing a delicate glass with too much force. I put my hand over hers, stopping the movement. "Gentle, Maya, like that, it breaks. Do it with care, as if you were bathing a baby." I taught her. I showed her how to soap up, how to rinse, how to drain. It was a 5-minute lesson more valuable than all the years of private school I had paid for. For the first time in years, my granddaughter and I were doing something together without screens in between, without demands, just two women taking care of their home. "Grandma," said Maya while drying a plate, "do you think my friends will talk to me again? The ones worth it?" "Yes," I assured her. "And the ones who aren't did you a favor by leaving. Now you know who is with you in the dark and who only looks for the light of the party." That afternoon I sat in my favorite armchair in the garden. I took out my old ledger, that hardcover notebook where I noted the expenses of my banquets years ago. I started a new page. Date today. Income, dignity recovered. Expenses, fear of loneliness, balance in favor. I looked at my rose bushes. They needed pruning. For a long time I let them grow wild. Let the weak branches suck the sap from the strong ones. Out of fear of cutting, out of fear the bush would look bare. But a good gardener knows that pruning is necessary. It hurts to cut what one loves, but it is the only way for it to bloom with strength the next season. Jasmine was inside learning to be an adult by force. Maya was discovering she has hands to work and not just to hold a phone. And I was here breathing the fresh air of the afternoon, knowing that finally, after so many years of being the silent provider, the shadow behind the credit card, I had reclaimed my place. I am not just a grandmother. I am not just a mother. I am Eleanor Vance. And my table will never again be full of people who don't deserve me. The sun began to set, dyeing the sky orange and violet. I heard Jasmine in the kitchen asking Maya where the oil was. Nervous laughter was heard and the noise of a pan falling. In another time I would have gotten up running to solve it. Today, no. Today I closed my eyes, smiled, and let them solve their own disaster. Because the greatest gift I can leave them isn't a full bank account, but the capacity to survive when the lights go out. And I, for my part, have a life of my own to enjoy, starting with this sunset that for the first time in a long time is mine alone. If you liked my story and want to hear more, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. If you'd like to support me, you can do it through Super Thanks. It would mean a lot. In the comments, tell me which city you're watching from and what time it is so I can see how far my story reaches. I've added 2 more life stories on the screen just for you. Click one now and let's keep spending time together. Much love. See you soon.